You're listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. To guide us through the intricacies and intersections of emotions, relationships, and male identity is renowned psychologist, author, and speaker Gunter. This is Inspire Change.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Inspire Change. Firstly, let me extend my respects to the Garigal people of the Eora Nation, on the custodians on whose lands we now live. And so, what I thought I'd do is a little bit of a different thing, okay? And that is, I've decided that every now and then I'm going to do like an article review. In psychology and in psychiatry, we often have these peer reviews and journal clubs and so on. I thought that concept was really interesting, and I probably don't use it enough. However, what prompted me was the article by Dr. Sarah McKay, who's a neuroscientist, and she's come to us through Oxford. And she wrote a really interesting article basically asserting that the lizard brain, the myth lurking in every coaching conversation. When I thought of a title for this, I thought, the lizard brain is dead, long live the brain. But in all seriousness, one of the things that she's talking about is something that is so common in psychiatry, in psychology, in coaching, the life coach Instagram posts that come out asserting that, lizards can't be leaders, the reptilian brain, how the reptilian brain is has the power to block therapy. And Dr. McKay goes very, very well into why this isn't the case. And I was really taken by it because I came out of university with this idea that there was like three parts to the brain, and the driving force, this sort of unconscious part of it, was the reptilian brain. Now, as neuroscience progressed and evolved, it became very clear that model is seriously flawed. And now, basically, the idea of the reptilian brain is usually discredited by most neuroscientists. And we can truly argue that it's out of date and it's not based on any contemporary science. Now, I'm sure there's going to be those in the audience who are going to go, oh, no. Right? They're usually the people, and I'm going to be really and hit you between the eyes, is they are the people that will completely disregard the evolution of knowledge through evidence to hang on to antiquated beliefs. Now, quick history. The actual idea of the reptilian brain came from a guy called Paul McLean in the 60s. And he was the one who suggested that the brain is divided into three layers. And the oldest, the reptilian brain, or R complex, controls basic functions such as breathing, body temperature, and heart rate. And next, the limbic system controls emotional responses. And finally, the most recent evolutionary part of this, according to McLean, is the cerebral cortex, which controls language and reason. Now, throughout this time, there was always a bit of confusion about which part of the brain are we exactly talking about. Is it the brainstem and the cerebellum, hypothalamus, amygdala? Now, all of you guys out there who have no anatomical or neuroscience background, don't worry about that stuff, that detail too much. But what happened with that model is it had a very quick uptake amongst therapists, coaches, and the sort of, personal development gurus in order to explain human behavior. Right, and we're talking predominantly about the fight or flight response. The other part of it was it became popular among psychotherapists because it seemed to match neatly with the personality theory that Freud came up with, the id, the ego, and the superego, and how that matched very neatly with the reptilian, limbic, and cortical brain, right? But let's focus on what we actually now really know from science. And firstly, and this is really important because evolution often gets misquoted or taken out of context. It's like people cherry pick stuff. Now, the important bit here is that, as Dr. McKay points out, is that our brains did not evolve from lizards, right? The idea that, it's never sat well with me because fundamentally, that's not how evolution really works. It's not linear, right? So the implication here is that evolution is a linear progression with one organism evolving into the next. So it goes lizard, mice, monkeys, and humans. Well, that's absolutely not correct. It's in fact factually wrong. Mammals didn't come from reptiles. We also didn't come from lobsters either, right? So the correct view of evolution is that animals radiated from common ancestors. Within these radiations, complex nervous systems and sophisticated cognitive abilities evolved independently many times. So that's an important point. And the other point that Dr. McKay points out is that the cerebral cortex is not unique to mammals because lots of other animals, reptiles, fish, and birds, also have cerebral cortices. And thirdly, she points out that the brain didn't evolve with more sophisticated layers built over simple layers. The notion of layers added to the existing structures across evolutionary time as the species became, and that they became more complex, is simply not correct. So where does it take us in terms of emotion? Well, we need to recognize that emotions are not pre-wired. We actually construct them. So we abandon the classical view, i.e. that we have this sort of reptilian idea, this triune brain, three parts to the brain to one which explains emotion as constructed. Okay? So various ingredients that happen in our experience are processed by the entire brain networks to construct consciously experienced feelings in the moment. Now let's put this to the test. And one really good construct is actually the idea of jealousy. Okay, so people often talk about jealousy as being an emotion, and it closely related, to our primitive side, and especially with jealousy, it's losing your partner and having a partner cheat on you, and it's a natural instinctive reaction. Well, according to the constructed emotion theory, that is absolutely not true. So, what are we talking about when we're talking about constructed emotions? Well, the ingredients are, firstly, the physiological sensation we feel in our body, the situation that we're in, and again, I want you to think about this with regards to jealousy, the people we're with, our memories and personal experiences, and the language we've learned to describe our conscious feelings. Okay, jealousy. I'll work with men in particular who have various ranges of jealousy happening in their life, from the like uncomfortable, low end sort of type of jealousy to the full blown green eyed monster where they imagine at every step of the way that their partner is plotting to cheat on them and to abandon them, right? So that again, raises the issue of where does that reaction come from? Well, firstly, I talk about the notion that jealousy is in fact not one emotion. It's a combination of stuff going on. Firstly, it's a fear of abandonment. Secondly, it's the intense anger and rage the person has towards that imagined event or the actual event of possibly having a partner who was unfaithful or discontent in the relationship, and their reaction to it is one of anger and rage. So, um, Dr. McKay in the article quotes Lisa Feldman Barrett, who says that an emotion is the brain's creation of what your bodily sensations mean in relation to what's going on around you in the world. There's another guy, Joseph Ledoux, who's proposed a similar theory of emotion construction based on decades of studying the most primal of emotions, and that is fear. He states that the conscious feeling of fear is what emerges when certain kinds of non conscious ingredients coalesce and are cognitively interpreted or noticed. Emotions like fear are often said to have been inherited from our animal ancestors. Fear and anxiety are not biologically wired. They do not erupt from a brain circuit in a pre-packaged way as a fully formed conscious experience. So this is really, really important, especially for us who are like psychologists, therapists, psychiatrists, who are trying to help people understand what's going on for them in their emotional experience. So the main point now that Dr. McKay draws out is that we label emotions based on the context. So if I've been a child who's had a very ambivalent or anxious experience of attachment with the caregiver, then I'm going to grow up into an adult who is either anxious, ambivalent, or avoidant of adult relationships and intimacy, because my anticipation is that that person could potentially leave me, which creates a great deal of distress in me, and my reaction to that is then anger and rage. So what do we do? Well, she says very clearly, name it to tame it. Okay, and this is where I very clearly identify the relationship to emotional maturity. Emotional maturity is our capacity to expand our emotional vocabulary. That is that, we learn new words like a child, except it doesn't stop in childhood, it continues as an adult and into our adulthood. So, we create a broader thesaurus, as Dr. McKay puts it, of emotional language. And so we can understand it more. Like in jealousy, if I understand that this isn't actually a thing called jealousy, but that I'm scared of being left alone and that I get angry about that, then I can deal with that in a completely different way, in a very conscious, cognitive way, in which my experience now changes as well as my relationship to the person that I'm with. So this is fundamentally really, really, really important, because constantly, especially working in the space with men, I get these notion. People talk a lot about the masculine versus feminine brain, and the idea that these things are hardwired in us. Jealousy is hardwired because men are dominant, and we want to possess. Relationships are not about possessing; they're about a stewardship. They're about an intimate connection. If my partner decides at some point or another that they don't want to be connected with me anymore, as a securely attached adult male, I'm not going to try to force that person to be with me, but rather I'm going to, sadly let go, but let go with respect and dignity, both for myself and the other person. So, as Barrett points out in her book, humans are not at the mercy of mythical emotional circuits buried deep in the animalistic part of our highly evolved brain, but rather, and I love this phrase, we are architects of our own experience. So that is fundamentally important. So, men, when you think about yourself and your relationships with others, you create this, whether it's pleasure or pain. And I completely disagree with a lot of people who suggest that, life is suffering. Life is what you make of it. But suffering's not a bad thing either, because we can learn from that. It often points us in the right direction. It's a bit like when you're trying to touch the stove for the third time with, the same experience all the time, which is that you burn your fingers. So, again, let me come back down to the basics here, folks. Let's abandon old thinking. Let's be flexible enough to embrace the new. That is, that we, like knowledge, can evolve. We can change. We often have turning points in our bodies of knowledge, whether that's history, psychology, psychiatry, medicine, neuroscience, whatever it is, that now expand our understanding of the world or our understanding of ourselves. So one of the key things in this is that once I understand this better, then I'm going to be better at emotional regulation. So rather than be, so jealous that I want to destroy my partner like Othello with Desdemona, who kills her out of this rush of rage, I'm going to have a meaningful conversation, see whether we can work it out, and then we make a decision based on that. So this is, again, and I want to stress this, a cornerstone in our understanding of our emotional being. So let's not go back into the classical outmoded ideas. There is no such thing as a reptilian brain. There is now just our brain. And on that note, folks, I hope that was useful. Please let me know in comments or anything that you find handy about your reaction to this. But remember, science is science. It's based on evidence. We can interpret that evidence in different ways, but beliefs are not science in that sense. They are just beliefs. Knowledge arises from the method of science. So until next time, let me sign off, and hopefully this will help you to inspire change in yourself. Learn a greater emotional vocabulary, as those of you who have young teenage boys will recognize that grunting is not an emotional word. Till next time, this is me signing off.
Thank you for listening to Inspire Change, a broadcast that strives to educate, motivate, and empower men to challenge traditions of masculinity. For more information on the Making Good Men Great movement, or for individual or group coaching sessions with Gunter, visit makinggoodmengreat.com. For inquiries regarding broadcast topics or appearing on the show, email Miranda@noirtainment.com. That's Miranda at NOIRTAINMENT.com.